Hello, my name is Michael Brad Bayless. I am the founder of Bayless Healthcare. Today we have a topic concerning therapeutic termination. Often, terminating therapy can be a very sensitive and thorny issue. We have with us today Dr. John McCain, who will explore this area and give you ways in which to terminate therapy in the most effective and efficient manner. I hope you enjoy this topic today, as Dr. McCain is a resident expert at Bayless Healthcare. Thank you.
First thing is, if you were to take 100 people out in the general public and ask them to give you a definition of termination, what do you think they would tell you it is?
Being fired.
Being fired. Okay. So here's where we need to reshape our frame of reference. Because the most popular definitions, depending on age, probably if it's above 25 or 30, it's going to be being fired. If it's below 25 and down, it's probably being killed. Okay. Neither one of which really set up a good frame of reference for the idea of therapeutic termination. Okay. So that's the first thing we have to look at. You know, can you really think of a positive application of the word to terminate? Okay. And what we do in the work that we do is really soundly embedded in the power of words, which means that even with your best intentions, if you try to facilitate something that you call a termination, it's going to have a degree of finality to it, a degree of kind of absoluteness to it, and a flavor of something negative ending. So the first thing that you ought to think about is why not to think about it that way. So I don't really talk about and use the word terminate, okay, for a number of reasons, and that being the biggest one. Okay. It also has to do with stages of change theory. And it has to do with at what point do you start preparing somebody, you know, for the movement out of this active phase of life study. Because I know you hear the kind of cliches about, well, termination discharge starts at the beginning. And the answer to that is yes, but not in the way that you're kind of trained to think about it. Okay. It has to do with, again, good service planning and what your goals are. But this whole idea of stages of change also speaks to termination of therapy. What's interesting is stages of change theory, I mentioned before, has kind of revised their concept in a way. They still look at termination as the end phase of therapy, but the difference is they look at a next phase, what they call transcendence, which is approaching life in such a way that's divorced and not dependent on problems. But still, if you think about change, the switch from actively examining your life formally with a professional and not doing so is a change. So the question is, if we really adhere to how people deal with change, how do we introduce pre-contemplation to contemplation? And where and how do you do that? That people should have a chance to be prepared for any major decision. And if they're not thinking about it, then it's going to be very hard for them to accomplish whatever that change is with any degree of confidence and any degree of acceptance, actually, too. So this is the transcendence phase, rising above a problem-oriented approach to living. Okay? And that's what we are hoping and for me expecting our clients to do. That at some point your approach to your life study shifts gradually from looking at problems to looking at possibilities. And the question is, you know, does that really have an endpoint that starts at the end of your formal life study? What you're really looking for is a chance to work with clients in such a way that they actually see and understand their own behavior and place in the world in a new and different way. I mentioned before that therapy is one of the distinguishing differences between therapy and counseling and advising all those other approaches. Is you're talking about how people are in the world and how they are in relationships. where every relationship is an example of study for every other relationship, and every problem that the client brings you is an example of problem approach for every other problem. That is a key to really understanding effective transition to formal life study to informal life study, which we're all involved in. Okay? So these are the definitions of termination when I looked at the dictionary. An end in time or existence, to bring to an end, to form a conclusion, to discontinue employment, to serve as an ending, limit, and boundary, to assassinate or to kill. Okay? So if we're trying to reconcile these two words, it's a little hard to do in our own minds, and I think really hard to do in our clients' minds too. So I think we really have to back up completely and reapproach how you conceptualize the end phase of what we do in a way that invites something other than being in the crosshairs of an assassin's bullet. Okay, so now keep in mind the whole purpose of this today is for you to think about your cases. And what I'd like you to do is to think about, if you have cases and you already had a caseload, think about a case that you're thinking about closing, or even a case that you did close and revisit it. Okay. But for the rest of you, think about this as a strategy for how you can approach your cases from the beginning that will result in less panic, less dependency, and less, quote, resistance when you start approaching the topic of closing out your relationship with your client. Because the only thing that's really ending is your relationship with your client. And the notion that that is the end of the client's world in some way is pretty arrogant and narcissistic. Okay? It's just a transition to you not being in their world. You weren't before. You weren't meant to stay in the world. And we're a relatively small piece of their lives. You know, if you look at the average lifespan as being 72 years old, you know, you'll be in this client's life for 6 to maybe 18 months. So I think we need to notch down the importance that we put on this and look at it as a normal transition of a relationship that has a specific purpose, and that purpose has been met. Okay, so this is what ties together the service planning pieces plus this part that we're talking about in terms of transitioning clients out of formal life study. It actually begins with your client's vision of the future. There's a piece of research called the ACE study, but what I really like about the ACE study, beyond that, is in Vincent Folletti's quote when he first wrote the study, and that's at the bottom. It's from T.S. Eliot's play Four Quarters. He writes, "In my beginning is my end." Now, T.S. Eliot is talking about life, okay? And what he's saying, and which the ACE study sort of gets to, is that how your life turns up is very strongly influenced by how you began your life. The ACE study points out real clearly that factors that affect you developmentally really influence things profoundly as an adult in ways that we didn't anticipate, including, it's a little hard to reconcile for some people how early childhood years and risk factors of development can predict the degree to which and frequency people have broken bones and fractured bones in their adult years, heart attacks, cardiovascular disease, suicide, that how your life formed at the beginning profoundly affects how you live your life and how your life turns out from both a emotional standpoint and a physical health standpoint. So if you're not familiar with the ACE study too, you really ought to read it and take a look at it, okay? And we'll probably do, either I'll do a presentation on it, or I'm trying to find somebody that's affiliated with Kaiser Permanente that maybe can come in and talk about it, because they basically funded the study. So think about your current cases, for those of you who disturbed. How do you define the goal of therapy as the first step to finding the ending? Simply because the ending will begin as you start accomplishing the goals that you set out in the first place. That the therapy part of our work with our client should end when our goals are being met. So in that regard, in the beginning is the end. As you set your goals in therapy, there's the beginning of your ending. And what also is true too is that because progress in therapy is incremental, whether it's a kid that is afraid to go to school or somebody that's having difficulty with understanding their emotions or relationship, because that's progressive, because movement and success in therapy is progressive, then what it also suggests is that rather than looking at the ending as a termination, a point, it's equally progressive. So progression towards the end of our work with clients isn't a single point. It's the process itself increasing in terms of a tipping point. When they first come in, it's focusing all on goals and objectives. So be careful about how you set your goals and objectives. And the goal is to accomplish that, which will be the end of our work. As you accomplish things, goals come down and objectives are accomplished. And at some point, there will be more things you've accomplished and you have come further to your ending than you were in the beginning. See, the interesting thing is that's the way life is too, okay? And that's where, my influences as existentialist comes in. Because life is a process, and everything in it is a process, not discrete beginnings, middles, and endings, but a process that's fluid and flows. So, once the need that motivated therapeutic work has been met, then the conditions for ending this process that we call therapy is also met too. And again, because progress is incremental, then the ending is incremental too, not a discrete point called termination that we drop on a client at the end of our work as if it's something separate. Now you're in therapy and now you're done, so now we're going to terminate. Okay. By separating out termination as a single event, separate from the process, as therapists, we actually encourage shock resistance and panic. Because anything that happens quickly for which somebody is unprepared will naturally relate in a state of panic. People are not prepared for something, haven't a chance to contemplate it. They see it as disconnected. So think about that. The more suddenly something occurs, the more likely it is people will naturally respond with resistance and panic. And it can show up in different ways. When people are coming to the end of your work, what are the things that you notice that may be different in the process of your work? What do you notice that's different?
They lead it more.
They lead it more.
As far as understanding the process.
Which is as it should be. Because at that point, they're no longer needing guidance to look at things they may be avoiding or not seeing. That they lead it more. So just as a matter of mathematics, if you want to look at it that way, the number of words per session is going to swing in the favor of the client away from the therapist. And I would argue it should be that way in the first place. If work is really going well, the process is more like the client is da 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 da, and the therapist goes da da, and the client goes da 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 da. Okay, that's good therapy. Not the therapist going da 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 da, and the client saying nothing. Okay, or or aren't you smart? Okay, the goal is to prompt thoughtfulness on the part of the client, and to do it as minimalistically as possible. Okay? The longer we're talking in therapy, the more likely it is that we're wasting time in words. Okay. Okay. So in the beginning is the ending. Okay. Whoops. Okay. The wrong way here. Okay. So that what we want to do is to make sure our therapeutic work ends up with having a sense of continuity. Here's what will happen if you define your therapy work as what's going on in the office. Because as I mentioned, most of the work of therapy isn't in the office. The beginning didn't occur in the office at all. Okay? The beginning happened long before the client even did the intake and long before they met you. So you weren't involved in the beginning. Okay? Once it's over, the client will continue to live. So you won't be involved in the ending either. Okay? And the therapeutic work also mostly should happen outside your office. It's the therapeutic work is what happens in between sessions. So we're not involved in the beginning, we're not involved in the ending, and we're only a minimal part of the middle, okay? And to the extent that the client focuses on therapy being in the office, here's what's going to happen when things get shaky and tough. They will avoid your office because that's where the difficult therapy is, so they will not come. They will be erratic in their coming. They will be afraid to come. They may be passive outside your office because I come to the office for therapy and then I go with my life. So if I think therapy happens in the office, then I'll be passive outside the office and waiting for my next therapy session. Okay? And if I think therapy happens in the office, I'm not going to want to leave the office. I'm going to become dependent on it because that's where I get what I need. Now, those are three entirely different outcomes, but all have to do with the overemphasis of where therapy is, in the office with you. So we can inadvertently create dependency or avoidance on the office, on the therapist, either one of which is problematic. Okay? It's one reason why when people, when clients find themselves in a really hot patch, I had this discussion with one of our 16-year-olds in Lighthouse just this weekend. He's thinking he wants to quit. I'm saying that's not possible. Okay? No, I don't want to come here anymore. I said, I understand that, but that's got nothing to do with you quitting what's going on. Okay? That all we do is here we talk about what's going on in your life. So we can quit talking about it, you and me, but that doesn't quit what's happening. Okay? And at that point, he's kind of curious. And we're having a conversation with somebody who just 30 seconds earlier decided he wanted to quit, meaning not be involved in therapy anymore. We're talking about an aspect of your life, and therapy is a component of your life. It's not a substitute for your life. It's not separate from your life. It's a way to, and an opportunity to examine aspects of your life that you may not have either inclination, ability, or time to do otherwise. So what I'm telling him is if you quit therapy, that's really pretty insignificant to what's really going on and what brought you here. You'll still be left with everything except a conversation about it. Okay? And if that's what you want, then we can talk about the consequences, and you can call it denial or whatever you want. But then my job and your job as therapists is not to make sure they don't quit therapy. It's to have them understand the implication of their decision. Okay? If you choose to do this, that's fine, but here are some things that you'll want to consider. Okay? So our role as therapists really doesn't change, regardless of what the client does or doesn't do. It's to provide clarity to what's going on, to have them see aspects that are difficult or that they're avoiding looking at, and have them see possibilities other than the course of action they're about to take. That is always the case. Even if the client, doesn't come in, there are still ways that you can do that. Okay? So what are ways that you've seen clients avoid coming into your office?
They just don't show up.
They just don't show. Okay. That's the easiest way. Okay. Excuses. I forgot. Okay. That's interesting. You forgot to come to a conversation to discuss how your life is not working. Because that's like forgetting that your car is not working while you're driving and it's not running. Okay. It's a pretty hard thing to do. Okay. So you forgot. Okay. You're busy. There's an interesting idea. Okay. Okay. And I think it becomes important, again, to not fight the client, but to continue to be a therapist. Let me understand what you're saying. Okay. And you provide an explanation of what we're doing, and then an explanation of what they're doing, and then motivational interviewing suggests that they have to reconcile the difference between the two. We just have to put the possibilities and the conflicts in front of them. Okay, you don't have to fight our clients and arm wrestle them to come in. Okay, just expose them to the decision-making process, what the natural consequences are, and what the alternatives are. And then, usually I'll say, "See you at 3." Okay, and hang up the phone. Okay, dissonance works. Okay, because the expectation I'm there, and that remains. What they're hoping is we do what we normally do. Okay, that's okay. Let's find another time. Okay? And to think about the implications of what we're saying. Okay? That it's not okay or not okay. This was the agreed upon time. okay? And this is what I'm seeing. And I'll be here expecting you at 3. Okay. Okay. Passive outside the office. What are ways that you've seen clients do that?
Not do their homework.
Yeah, you give things to do and it doesn't get done. Why? Because I forgot. And then it's the same process. Okay, let me understand. We decided to do this. We decided to do this because X, Y, and Z. Okay. Help me understand how it was that things went, that you lost sight of that, lost focus of that. Because what I'm also doing is reinforcing the idea that the work happens outside of the session. It's a continuous process, in session, out session, in session, out session. The more we define it as a discrete process, you're giving me permission to not think about, not do anything in between. Okay? And that's probably not going to be an effective way to get somebody to consciously change their lives, by being unconscious 6 days and 23 hours and conscious just 1. Okay? That's where mindfulness comes in. Okay? Have your clients be mindful of the nature of what we're doing and mindful of the degree to which they're staying focused on what we agreed to do in the session now and during the course of the week. Okay? Be conscious. Okay. And becoming dependent on your office. What a situation where you've seen where that may have occurred, where clients become dependent on the process, on your office.
Calling you at all hours of the night.
Yeah. Yeah. Because after all, you're the one with the answer. That's why it's better for you to have questions that then the clients will ask themselves in those moments. What you want is for them to internalize the conversation that they're having with you. So even in a crisis, and even with trainees, you might call and I'll say, well, what are you thinking about doing? What do you think I'm going to say? Because the real goal is not for me or you as the therapist to be the source. The real goal is for you to be the catalyst. And otherwise, if you want to have a 24-hour practice, people are calling you all days. And people will say that. If you ever need me, then blah, 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 blah. I'm thinking, oh my God, are you? Half the times when I get called into a consultant with an agency, that's the problem. They talk about being burned out and and you listen to them, and it's all about an open invitation to be reached at any time. If you ever need anything, give me a call. I'll always be here for you. Okay. Whose need is that? Okay. If we have a need to be needed, then you need to deal with that someplace else than with your clients, because it's the same source of distraction about needing to have positive feedback on your work, but it spills over into your clients. The reason why people with borderline pathology are so difficult for a therapist, why do you think that is? I mean, when I do workshops on treating borderline personality, you can almost see people go panic. Okay, why do you think it's so difficult for people to work with people who have a borderline personality disorder?
Is they're always so needy? Is there always?
No, that's why. That's the part we like. Okay. The part we don't like is that they don't appreciate it. Okay. Okay. There's an expectation that the client should be grateful and they should appreciate what you do. Okay. Because nothing evokes therapist reactivity like the feeling of and being in and talking about borderline personality disorder, because they thwart the therapist's need for appreciation. Children are needy too. We don't get mad at them because they're needy and they like us, okay? Except if they're teenagers. Okay, right? And there you have the second population people are most likely to shy away from. Okay. In both situations, a kind of departure of the expected etiquette and protocol of therapy, where I say yep to my therapist and you say yep to me, and then I say thank you so much. Okay? And it's not I say yep and you say yep and I say F you, I'm not doing that. Okay? Wait, I'm the therapist. Okay? I'm just here to help. Don't get mad at me. No. Get mad at me so I can show you that you're not really angry. Okay? And you process it. When therapists get frustrated, it's often because they slipped into their needs and have an expectation of how the client's supposed to be, And there you have, once again, our God complex. Okay? The belief that people should be the way that you want them to. Okay? All right. Okay. Things that contribute, and this gets to service planning, treatment planning too. Things that contribute are, in terms of missing the mark, a lack of direction towards a definitive goal. How can you have a clean ending if you have no destination, no goal? Just go west or go east. And we'll figure out where you're going to stop when we get wherever that is. Okay? So there has to be an objective for there to be focused action and activity, a sense of progress towards. Okay? And that actually contributes to not having a definitive goal. And it would be like, I use this example, I think, maybe it was at our team meeting, that it's kind of like going into graduate school and they don't tell you what the criteria for graduating is. Just keep studying and we'll let you know. Okay? Okay? I don't know about you, but I'm not getting into that graduate program. Because there needs to be some sense of boundaries. That there is an end in sight that, number one, I can influence and affect, control, if you will. And I can look at this as a lifelong commitment, not a lifelong commitment. That then gets terminated at the discretion of the therapist without any clear criteria for that. Okay? The other is floating goals and variable objectives. Here's our goal, and now we're going to add this goal. And now we're going to add this goal, and now we're going to add this goal. It's service planning by hitchhike, that there are other things that are hitchhiked on. And once again, you have no clarity in terms of goals and objectives. I want to go to Colorado, and halfway to Colorado, I say, well, let's go to Idaho instead, because I think there's some interesting things in Idaho. Okay? And on the way to Idaho, I'm thinking, Portland, there's some interesting things there. Let's do that. Okay? And your therapy can be like that. It's what I mentioned before, where there was a little bit of dissonance, that don't have any illusions about the fact that the therapy is yours. That the therapist drives the process. Okay? And it's important to be aware of that. Okay? Okay. A lack of incremental markers. If we don't have a goal, how can you have incremental markers? And the problem with that is it can give the client and therapist, for that matter, a sense of nothing happening, no progress. Even if it's a kid who has explosive episodes, every day or twice a day. If you don't have incremental markers, if the kid starts having explosive episodes maybe twice a week, all you're noticing is still has explosive episodes. And as a therapist, you don't have a sense of accomplishment and progress, and neither do you have as a kid. And even if it doesn't happen for a couple of weeks, and there's an explosive episode, everybody says, see, it's the same. Nothing is different. It's still blowing up, even if the kid only has it once a month. So there needs to be valid and credible markers, incremental markers of progress, because we know progress is incremental. So it can't be a discrete, okay, here's the problem, and the goal will be when that's gone. How are we shaping and moving towards that so that your client has a sense of accomplishment? And that's particularly true if you can deliver accomplishment where the client is expecting criticism. Okay? A kid blows up, okay, and has a tantrum. And the parents are likely, without your help, to deal with that as same old thing. But what if the tantrum only lasted 5 minutes and it usually lasts half an hour? And you pull the kid in and say, I have something to talk to you about. The kid's expecting criticism, as opposed to, I'm so proud of you. In the past, when things really bothered you, you broke things and threw things and it lasted half a day. I'm so proud of you, because you had a problem like we all do, and you handle it so completely differently. Well, the same thing has to happen. There has to be some feedback for clients on incremental progress, because they will do the same thing when the problem reemerges. they're prone to beating themselves up. Nothing's different, apologetic, upset. So we have to show our clients there's severity and intensity changes when it comes to human experiences too that we have to have our clients look at. The next one is the real key one. It has to do with understanding the role of process, which I keep pushing and pushing and pushing and telling you that therapy is the process. It's not the content of the problem, it's the process. And that is, if you don't do that, there will be a failure to generalize the process to wider applications. All you'll be doing is serial, discrete problem solving, which will guarantee that whenever the client has a problem, they'll come back to you for a solution again. The goal is to have them see how they approach problems so that you can generalize this to the other, and that also provides confidence and decreases dependency on the office because they're learning it's how they do things, not getting advice from you on this single thing. Okay? So it's very important to switch to process, to lock in lessons learned that can be applied to various situations and various relationships. Okay? Inviting panic due to a lack of continuity of process. Okay, we're ending now. Oh my God. Okay. Well, what if? Okay. And what I see quite a bit is there's a termination, quote unquote, and then 2 to 4 weeks later, the client shows up again and wants to start. And the thing that's interesting, in most of the cases, there's been nothing significantly different that happened. Well, my son had problems at school. Okay, okay. Or in one case, school's starting up again, and I wanted to start just in case there's problems at school. And I'm thinking, what's the message to the kid? Okay. Total lack of confidence. Anticipation is more likely, particularly if it's anticipatory anxiety, it's more likely to produce the thing that you're anxious about. Okay. That the more you worry about driving, the more likely is you're going to get hit in an accident. It's why there's a discrete curve in terms of accidents and experience of drivers. That it's not that drivers who are early aren't as good, they're distracted by their own worry. Okay. They have the talent to move the thing, okay, but they're distracted. And therefore most likely to experience what they're anxious about experiencing. Self-fulfilling prophecy. It works in various aspects of living. Okay? And the last one, normalizing regression rather than fostering application. You know, if you have a problem, you can always come back. We'll be here for you. Okay? That's no different from the parent who moves the kid back into therapy because school is starting. We're basically inviting regression rather than fostering application. The goal is to get our clients to foster, to apply the lessons they've learned, but to do that they have to know what the lessons are. And again, the lesson is not in the content. It's in the process of how they approached it differently and experienced a success. Okay? Okay. Yes.
I hear what you're saying about not inviting them back, but I sometimes, just what came up for me is like sometimes people need that safe space to be able to...
Who needs it, you or the client?
Hmm?
Who needs it, you or the client? What's your goal? Think about it. What's your goal? To foster independence from you in the process, or is to foster dependence and continuity on it? Okay? It's the same dilemma in some regards with parenting. Okay? Your goal is to raise your kids to be independent so they will never leave you because you'll miss them. Okay, okay. See, what is your goal as a therapist? It's to provide confidence to your client to be able to handle the circumstance without the need for professional guidance and help. Now, there are subcategories that you could put maybe SMI and chronically mentally ill. Okay, and we can talk about that at a different time. But that's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about people that are reasonably healthy, confused, certainly wounded emotionally, whose problem isn't that they aren't capable of independent living, but one of two things. Either they don't have the skill or they don't have the confidence to do it. So, good, you're thinking. And you have this nice confused look on your face. I love that. Okay, I like that. Okay, because be careful of what you believe. Okay, there's a bumper sticker I like to mention before. Be careful. What is it? Okay. It has something to do with don't believe everything that you think. That's it. Okay. Be careful what you believe because it'll be true for you. And it doesn't matter what is true. All it matters is what you believe is true. If I'm a parent and I believe my kid is going to have difficulties going back to school, I will convey that in all kinds of ways. A longer escort to the school, instead of opening the door and saying, you know, have a great day today, let me walk you to the school. Okay? Are you going to be okay? Okay? I'll be at home, and you know that they'll let me know if anything happens. Okay? Okay? Okay, just put the kid back in the car and take him back home. Okay? That's the invitation. Okay? So look at therapy in the same way. What is the goal, really? The goal is to get the person out of therapy. That's the ultimate goal. Well, the ultimate goal is and to have them never come back, because they've learned the process lessons in life that they can learn. The most simple thing we try to teach people, it's a powerful but simple thing, and that is you're involved in your life, involved in your life, involved in your life. Take a step back just for a second, take a look at your life. Take a look at what's going on. Don't just keep doing what's going on. Develop the ability to observe yourself in action and to make decisions to course corrections or building momentum because what you're doing is working. That's the primary goal of therapy, to create that capacity to observe self and process in your life. When people get caught up, they lose the capacity for observation. They can't be mindful of what's going on. And if they're not mindful of what's going on, you can't exercise choice. Choice requires conscious awareness of what's going on. Otherwise, you will simply go with your hierarchy of probability responses that as a psychologist we can measure. I mentioned before, we don't measure personality, we measure probability theory. That in this situation, you're probably going to do that. And we can do that with a high degree of accuracy, because when people get stressed out, they stop becoming mindful and they stop exercising choice and they fall back on habit patterns. It's not your personality, it's your habits that are measurable by psychological assessments. And very accurately able to measure them. Because when people are distressed or not conscious, not even distressed, but just not conscious and paying attention, they have rhythms and routines that are very predictable. In every way you can imagine. And that's why psychological testing is very accurate. And people can take a test and you can give them feedback and they'll say, that's me. And I'll say, no, that's not you. That's you practice so much that you act that way all the time without practice anymore. And I can measure that. But at any time, if you're conscious, you can make a decision that violates your personality profile. At any time. That we create our personality and then act like we're victims to it. Okay? You can shift your personality anytime you want to. Okay? But it takes a lot of courage and awareness to do it. So I don't want to be like dismissive of that. It takes conscious awareness and courage to do something that you don't think is your normal tendency. Okay. 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 So the question is, and then we'll get into discussions about specific cases. How can we have the ending feel more like this and less like this, where the client sees himself here on a bullseye of possible failures, panic, and uncertainty? Okay? And it starts with redefining the process that we label termination in such a way that it affects, or it appears and feels more like the process that you all call graduation. Okay? Because what they also don't do in graduate school is congratulations and you may need to come back, and if you do, that's okay. Okay? Okay. And by, where's my degree? Oh, you might need some more work. So we'll hold it for you. But don't worry, it'll be here. at the university. It'll be here. And so you can come back and look at it whenever you want to. Okay? Okay? So how can you, from the beginning, set up a process where there's incremental awareness, decreasing need, increased confidence, and an end that the client knows and asks for because they're ready? I've accomplished all the goals according to my educational plan. I've had all the classes that I want to take. I've passed all the courses. I've demonstrated proficiency. I've done all those things, so it's time for me to graduate. So I'm putting my application in for graduation. Because I think you have to apply for graduation. Nobody comes to you and says, time to graduate, okay? I think. But if you need to come back, that's okay. You're aware and you facilitate it, and you're the one that takes the first step. Okay. So let's talk about cases for a little bit, for the rest of the time. Okay. When you're deciding what the client needs, it's very important for you to make sure it's what the client needs and not what someone else wants from them. That's the biggest error. Okay, child needs to follow parents' directions and obey the rules. Really? Mm-hmm. The question is, why doesn't the child do that? Okay. So, let's talk about some of you who are just starting cases. How will you know when you're finished? Maybe more importantly, how will the client know that it's time for them to move on? Because graduation is moving on. It's not finishing anything. It's moving on to something else. Because, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think you went to graduate school so you could do something else better. Okay? And that's the model that you want. Accomplishing and being better prepared to face and handle something that you were trained and prepared to do. Okay, so. Who wants to take a shot at this? What does your new client need? And how will you know when they've accomplished that in such a way that there'll be clarity that it's time to move on?
I have a client who he really wants to work on his self-esteem. He's really down on himself a lot.
What's self-esteem?
His personal, of his, I guess, his proficiency in life.
Self-efficacy.
Was it?
Okay. You know what the research on self-esteem tells us? That it's not relevant. How a person feels about themselves is not relevant to success.
How is success defined in that?
Now we're getting someplace. Because can you see self-esteem?
Can you see it?
Yeah.
No.
Then how are you going to measure it and change it?
You can't see happiness either.
Huh? Yeah, I just saw it right there. Okay.
You saw
See?
smile.
Yeah, I know. But I can look at that. Okay.
Well, maybe self-esteem could be measured by smiles and happiness.
Okay. I beat this kid up. He was bleeding. Man, I felt good about that. See, that's why self-esteem isn't. Because you can have positive esteem and pride about things that are incredibly destructive. Okay. How you feel about yourself can come from a lot of different places. The question is your confidence in your ability to affect your life. Self-efficacy. The research on that is very powerful. That when people feel like what they do matters to their life circumstances, that's an incredibly powerful feeling. So now what is true is that if you don't feel that what you do matters, you're probably not going to feel very good about yourself. But the not feeling good about yourself comes from someplace. And so that's what we have to look at. why does this person not feel good about themselves? Unless you're convinced that the person was born and has a endocrine problem or a biologically based depression, which is valid and happens, okay? It's why you also have to be aware of why the person doesn't feel good about. What if I don't feel good about myself because my serotonin levels and norepinephrine are off? Or because I have a thyroid that decreases my energy and creates fatigue all the time. See? So what's the source? This is where we have to be very careful about thinking through a case and making sure that we come to a destination that makes sense and is doable. Because I can have a treatment plan that says we're going to get to Shangri-La in 6 months.
Are we still talking about this client or just general?
No, because we're talking about every case is every other case.
Yeah.
Because what I can promise you is that when you said self-esteem, and I can promise you this because I noticed there were heads nodding. Yeah, increasing self-esteem is a good idea. No, increasing confidence that self-efficacy is having a sense of accomplishment, okay? That the feeling good about yourself is tied to something tangible other than a teacher patting you on the head and saying, we don't score grades here because it makes kids feel bad, okay? Okay, I got an A. And at some point, people know when there's fraud perpetrated. They know when there was no effort tied to the outcome and will devalue the outcome. Oh, the kids will like the A. They'll like the good ratings. They'll like the smiley faces. It'll have them feel good. But do they really value that? Or is it just something that they accumulate? If there's no effort, people tend not to value the prize. So think about that. Okay. So what are other things that you all think could contribute to feeling poorly about oneself? What do you think? What could cause a person to feel poorly about themselves?
Feeling inadequate in other areas.
Like what?
The same client who feels really inadequate with his peers because he gets picked on and teased a lot, and he doesn't do particularly well in school, so he feels inadequate in school.
Mm-hmm. So you just hit the two areas right there. They'll feel poorly about themselves because in relationships they don't feel valued and meaningful, or they feel poorly about themselves because they're in situations they don't feel they can be successful. Everything else is just details. Those are the only two problems you're ever going to face. It'll be situational failure or interpersonal lack of value. That's it. Okay? Everything else is just details. Okay? And so if you approach it in that way, how likely it is that you think that the failure is going to be compartmentalized to one circumstance? If I really do have a profound sense of inadequacy in performing at school, which I probably do you think I'm going to experience to have confidence and believe in excellence in other areas of my life? See, that's the process. A lack in the belief of one's ability to be successful, period. Okay? Okay. And when you're looking at a need, you might want to think in those terms. Okay. Which is why it's not coincidence that this is next. Okay. Because the nature and process of problems are very, very few. Just like you have this whole book, the DSM soon to be 5, okay? It has like how many hundreds of pages of diagnostics and problems? You know, I really defy you to find one that isn't tied to not being a feeling of success in a situation or not being valued by people in their life. Try to find one, okay? Okay. It's just details. Details, details, details. But the details are important because they give you the content of the conversation we need to have. But don't mistake that for the actual problem or the solution. There's a difference between a diagnosis and a problem, okay? A diagnosis is a series of observed events some internal and some external, some behavioral, some emotional, and some cognitive. That it's a profile of different events that shape to form a syndrome that we call a disorder. And that's where you have your symptomology. Okay? But it still boils down to a person not feeling capable of doing it, whatever it is, or not feeling a sense of being valued or cared for in relationships with whoever that is. And typically, your treatment planning, your needs and goal statements really should reflect that. Now, it can include the specificity too, which is okay. In that situation, you know, if the kid says, or the mother says, and they all agree that there's a need for, Junior to feel confident in his ability to be successful at school, that's a legitimate need. What I'm saying is, be more ambitious and look at how that can generalize to other areas of feelings of confidence. I keep saying as therapists, we lack ambition sometimes. I don't know if we're afraid, but again, don't be afraid of your greatness, okay? Don't be afraid of your ability to affect people in the world, okay? And you can do that, multiple generations. Don't be afraid of that. Embrace it and be ambitious. Our goal is to change how people approach their life and how they fundamentally view themselves. That's the goal. And it shows up in these nuanced, specific areas that we need to tackle by way of example. Okay? Otherwise, the next time I have a problem, I'm going to come back again. Okay, Junior's confident at school, but now he wants to play football or enroll in piano class, and he doesn't have confidence. Okay, now we'll have a treatment plan for Junior to be confident he can accomplish playing the piano. Okay? And then now we'll have another treatment plan when he turns 16. Junior will have a treatment plan to be confident he can learn to drive a car. And then another one, Junior will be confident he can enroll and be successful in college. And then another one, Junior will be confident that he can learn and be successful in this relationship with this woman that he wants to marry. Okay? At some point, I think it's important to tackle the person's failed sense of self that makes them not believe in themselves. And to look at that. How is it that you are so accomplished and able and you can't see that? That's the message. Okay? We're not changing Junior, we're having him see himself more clearly. Okay? So what's the need? Okay? You see, it's not as simple as just writing something on the paper. Let's have the need be credible and something that we can invest effort into because it really is meaningful. Okay? Okay? So others, what do you think when you think of your new clients? How are you conceptualizing what they need? Other examples. Okay. I'll just go around the table if I have to, that's fine. Okay, so don't think you're going to sit there and you're not going to be able to participate. I will start at you and we'll go all the way around if I need to. But I do that at college. I don't like to do that in my clinic. Okay. So everybody's got a case, yes? Okay. Have you had cases before?
Yes.
There you go. Okay. 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 So everybody's covered. Okay. So.
I have one.
Okay. What's the need? And how did you come to conceptualize that?
The need is to feel confident that he can go through life without therapy.
Okay.
Because he's been in services for multiple years.
See, I love that because that's what I would have assumed.
Yeah.
Now, how many of your clients actually have that need?
Many.
And what is the psychological impact of defining that goal? Just defining that as a goal, what is the psychological impact of that? That's incredibly brilliant. Because what you're really saying is you're a lot more capable than you think, and when you see that and understand that, you won't need to be doing this. There's nothing fundamentally wrong with you except your lack of confidence and ability to see that, okay? That's ambition. I love that. That's what I mean by an ambition as a goal. Because there is a pattern that is not helpful. That's great. I just love that. That's one of the best goals I've heard in a long time. Okay? I'm happy. That'll keep me happy for the rest of the week. Okay? 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 Okay. be ambitious. And the thing I like about it, it's an ambitious goal, but it's tied directly to a fundamental reality in this client. It's not like we're picking something out of the sky and being idealistic. It's a real problem that you can see in this person's approach to living. Okay, so other goals. It's your needs and goals that you're setting up for your cases right now.
Well, it's interesting. I had a client who perceived herself as something different in a negative way than many other people, including like her primary and secondary support groups.
Okay.
People that her husband had co-workers and their families that they would have dinners with.
Okay, now hold that thought for a second. I'm going to come back to you. How many of you have clients that have that same fundamental problem? That they perceive themselves in a wholly different way than how other people perceive them, and they're distressed by their perception. Okay? Okay? So, if you look at this hierarchy of needs, where would that fall? An issue of safety, an issue of relationship and security, an issue of confidence, an issue of purpose and meaning. Where do you think that could fall? What do you think here? What do you think?
Well, with her, it turned out to be purpose and meaning.
Mm-hmm.
It was very interesting.
Mm-hmm.
And what we did is we sat down and we explored some possible ways of maybe some roots of why she may have thought that. But in the gist of it, what we did is we wrote her story. And her story was, what did you do in your life that you felt that you've accomplished something?
Mm-hmm.
And we went through all these things, and she ended up modeling.
Okay.
And she's like, I forgot that I modeled. What did she do? She ended up going out in the last couple of weeks, building a profile with a professional, and started modeling again.
Cool. The question is, how did she forget? How would she get to a point, because this is the process piece, how would she get to a point where the accomplishments that she had, she lost sight of, and left her feeling and seeing herself as a shell? How did that happen?
She got wrapped up in what she thought of what people were thinking of her.
And that's where you get back to the second piece. If you're fundamentally insecure in your relationships, you'll become who you think they will love as opposed to who you are. Okay? It's a fundamental insecurity about your belief that people will love you as you are. Which is why we don't change people. That's a huge misconception. People, we want to change. You have to, no you don't. You have to see yourself more clearly. Unless you want to get back into the God complex saying that you're in the business of changing people. Okay, just whop. Okay, you're different, Amy. Okay? That's not going to work with you because you already believe you're God. I know that. Okay. But also think about, just like the psychological impact of a goal that says we need to have you essentially learn to be able to trust and believe in your ability to manage in your life without therapy. There's a psychological impact to that. Okay. Well, similarly, if you think about the psychological impact of what your needs and goals are too. What's the psychological impact of saying you need to change who you are? And just think about that for a second, how that feels. You need to change who you are, okay? And that's the goal. Okay? Versus you need to see yourself more clearly. Okay? You need to understand yourself more clearly and to learn what you're truly capable of. Now, what's the difference between how those two things feel? They're both needs, both goals, okay? What did the first one feel like?
Makes you feel bad about yourself.
That you're wrong.
Okay? And if you have a good streak of rebelliousness like me, there's a part of me saying, who the F you are telling me who I am, who I need to be. Okay? See, either side of the spectrum doesn't work. I'm finally think there's something wrong with me. Oh my God, fix me. I need to be in therapy for life, right? Okay? Or, who the hell you think I am? You are, tell me who I am. Because it's fundamentally not connected to a reality. As opposed to a statement that's clear, precise, and fundamentally true for all of us. There are facets of yourself that you cannot see. And the problem is that you don't see it, and therefore can't see the associated abilities, options, and alternatives along with that. you're fully capable of courage. But your fear that you're not, it's not that you're afraid and not courageous. It's your fear that you're not that keeps you from seeing your own courage. Okay. So think about the emotional impact of the need statement and how important it is that a person feels the statement and feels that there's a challenge worth taking and feels that if I accomplish that goal, I will feel like I have done something of merit, that I will have accomplished something for myself. Okay. But so you can see how basically pushing aside her misconception of herself was a huge change for her. But more importantly is that she understands how she put herself into that box in the first place. That's the process. So that when I start thinking this, when I start doing this, fundamentally, when I start feeling like I'm not liking myself, the problem, because I learned before, is that I'm losing sight of my accomplishments and my abilities. Let me step back and do what you did. Rewrite this story, because actually the story I'm believing right now is revisionist. I lived this, and now I'm rewriting a story that leaves that out. So if she can learn to do that, then she won't need to have somebody come into a therapist to do that. And that's the ultimate goal. To learn to process your life in such a way that you can see your own process and make corrections as your life is going along. Because you're mindful, conscious, aware, and now can exercise choice. And, okay, you can continue to negate all your accomplishments, and when that happens, this is how you feel. Or you can embrace all your accomplishments, knowing that you tend not to do that when you're worried about what other people think of you. You try to become someone else. And is it really surprising that if you become someone else, you become detached from all the value that's connected to you? I'm so busy trying to be this person for you, of course I'm going to be detached from myself. And being detached from yourself is the best way to not appreciate who you are. So the fundamental thing is, for her, is being clear that when you become worried about other people's view of you, it's entirely possible that you will separate from yourself and try to become the person that you think that they will like. And here's the dilemma. Let's say it works. They still will not be liking you. They'll be liking the character that you created. And so you're still stuck with the same thing, because at some level you will know that, and that's why you ended up in this office today. Because the deception didn't work for you. Okay? Okay? Process. Okay? Other first early starts. What do you see as a need or goal, and how did you conceptualize that? Okay.
One of the clients I'm working with, the mom brought in to work with anger.
Okay.
But talking with him, it's the sadness, depression, and sadness. I don't see the anger.
See, I ain't talking about that. The truth is profound, but trust me on this, the problem will never be anger.
And then just kind of further exploring it, it sounds like it's more about the needs of relationships.
Okay.
It seems like that's the biggest
Okay.
lack in.
And where do you see the sadness coming from? If it's a relationship need, where does this person feel like he's not measuring up to someone else?
I think it's a lack of relationships. Mom's
Even
been
more so. Okay.
gone with drugs or physically gone. Dad's never been there, and friendships are very lacking.
Mhm. So that's probably more accurate. That there's no baseline for being able to feel valued and to experience and express value and care for other people, because life is so chaotic and transitional. Okay. So now think about that. The difference between the two statements. The goal is to learn to control and manage your anger. Okay, just take that one in. Okay. Or the goal is to create and build relationships that will leave you feeling connected and valued. Okay, now, take the first one. What was your reaction and how did that feel to you? The goal is to learn to manage and control your anger.
We don't care what you're thinking or feeling.
There's no internal concern, okay? And, you know, how do you do that, by the way? Can anybody give me an idea of how to control and manage my anger?
Understanding where it comes from in the first place.
Oh, but that's not managing, controlling it. That's eliminating it. Oh my God, how about that as a plan? How about making the anger not necessary? Because the stuff that fueled it isn't allowed to build. That anger is not the problem, it's the solution to this problem. And what I can promise you is 100% of the time, that will be the case. The anger will be the solution to a problem of hurt, sadness, fear, and anxiety. 100% of the time. 100% of the time, okay? That we're chasing a red herring, going after the anger thing. It will take you nowhere, okay? Except to there. And you also start differently, because here's the other thing. Saying you need to learn and control and manage your anger is kind of very similar to say you need to change who you are. Because what's happening is that this is happening and we're going to stop that. That's what managing and control is. That's what it is. And that's not going to feel good as a process, as opposed to setting up a process, which is not unusual, that mirrors the problem. Because what you'll be doing is building a meaningful relationship with somebody who will feel valued and listened to. Which is why you have to get out of the content into the process. So as things change and he starts to connect or she starts to connect, whoever it is, do you have the emotional guts to talk about that? I'm feeling like there's been a shift in our relationship. What do you think that it's about? And you want the person to discover how to build relationships like this. I'm learning to trust you. I enjoy spending time with you. I look forward to being here and learning things if it's a kid, because that's the relationship of adults to children. That you're reliable, you're here. When I come, you're here. That's what being there for you means, not that fluffy new age stuff, okay? Being for you isn't this metaphysical thing. It's when you say you're going to be present, you will be there, okay? So building credibility in relationships. So the great thing is that the solution for the problem is developing a relationship in therapy. But it only generalizes if you take the current experience the client has and export it to others. So what would happen if you develop routines where there are other people you become familiar with? Okay. What would happen if you kept eating at the same lunch table and talking to people? What would happen if you developed a routine that's predictable and there will be people that see you and you see them regularly? Okay. And you can see where that goes in terms of parent relationships. Wouldn't it be great if your parents were more regular and consistent in your life? Okay. So it goes a lot of different directions if you hit the fundamental simplicity of the need. He needs consistency in people in his life, a sense of predictability and a sense of continuity in relationships. Because if relationships will keep changing and changing and changing, why is he going to invest? It's a common problem with people that have serial moves, whether they're military families or foster kids. And we say it's a problem with attachment. No, it's the wisdom of not wanting to be hurt anymore. He doesn't have an attachment problem. He wants to attach. But why would he? If he knows you're just going to leave again like the other 15 foster parents. What's the point? And so what we end up doing is defining a need that reflects our outside perception and not the internal need of the kid. So it's a subtle thing, but you can see the implications are huge in terms of strategically where your therapy is going to go and where your focus is going to be. So, you have it, okay? Other needs. I'm paying attention to who's talking, so I can, in my mind, I can cross them out and say, well, you said, and you said, and you said. And so that means by deductive logic, I know everybody that didn't say anything, okay? Okay?
Mother and son came in. Mom says need is he needs to go to school.
Why?
because he hasn't been. But what I,
He's probably sitting there saying, "Thing, why?" Okay, but it tells us something. Keep going.
after a while, what I think it is, he doesn't feel safe enough outside of his room.
What happens in his mind when he goes outside his room?
He says he gets anxious.
Mm-hmm.
He becomes preoccupied with what could be,
Okay.
what hasn't been.
Mm-hmm.
And that freezes him in place, so much so that people come up to him and says, "What's up? What's going on?" You're just standing there staring at a wall.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And so other people think, what do other people think what's wrong with him?
They think he's lazy,
Mm-hmm.
unmotivated.
Mm-hmm.
I think I've only had one session, so I haven't dug deep enough yet, but I don't think he feels safe enough outside his room to really put himself out there.
And so the bottom of the hierarchy is, if safety can't be presumed, don't expect activity to occur other than hiding out and protecting yourself from impending or perceived harm. Okay. So he needs to go to school. No, he needs to believe that he'll be safe. And again, the difference in need, which is why I said he needs to go to school. Why? Somebody wants him to go to school, that doesn't mean he needs to go. If you ask the kid, you need to go to school, he'll probably say no. Because if he did, he'd be going. Okay? But the need to go to school is about accomplishing learning, which is the third step here. The first step is safety. If the person doesn't feel safe, you can wipe out anything else. If there aren't relationships they trust they can rely upon and value, you can wipe out everything else. If a person feels safe and there's relationships that are meaning and create emotional stability and security, then you can start looking at doing things. But until those two things exist, you can forget to do anything. I don't care if it's going to school or going to work, or it doesn't matter. Whatever it is people are saying that they need to do is not going to happen. Because there are conditions, there are preconditions that have to occur to allow that to be a priority and a possibility. Okay? But you can see how if you go that route right away, you know, that's a plan doomed to fail if it starts there, needing to go to school. Okay? That may be one of the objectives to the need. One of the objectives is for him to feel safe enough that he can go to school, and that becomes immeasurable. Because it stands to reason, if he does go to school, it means he feels more safe. So, how many days? What's the baseline of going to school now? And the other things that are a consequence of the lack of feeling safe. And there, like you've already mentioned, some other consequences that are associated with observable behavior that's related to being afraid to go outside the room. Okay? So obviously something happened in this kid's life that gives him a fundamental feeling of not being safe in the world. Okay? And that's more important to the kid than going to school and learning how to count or spell. So until we can get to that. See, the problem is the kid's priorities are right. The adult's priorities are off. Okay? That's often the case with children. You show me a kid who's refusing to go to school, I'll show you a kid has good reason not to go. And it's not school phobia or all those other things. It's those other kinds of things. Embarrassment because the kid is incompletic, you know. Nobody mentioned that. It's kind of significant, okay? Nobody mentioned that this is a 12-year-old kid was incompletic. Nobody mentioned that. I think that's a pretty big disincentive to not going to school. And so now we're having the kid do a neurological exam, a physical exam, check to see if there's anything medical going on. Okay, and we're really reapproaching this. What would need to happen for this kid to feel safe enough to go to school, not risk embarrassment and humiliation, the second piece up, to go to school? We're asking a kid to risk embarrassment and humiliation because he needs to go to school. So be careful. I'm hoping what you're getting is that this is thoughtful work, setting up what your needs are, because it can put you in a direction that the client will embrace your plan because it's sensible and they feel it, or it'll set you up in a situation that could be adversarial, either directly or covertly, where the client will sign it because you're the therapist, because it's powerful in that role. And even as they're signing it, I think, that's not going to happen. happen, okay? And that's particularly true if it's a client who worries about how others think. They'll do anything to be a good client. So watch the parallels. Okay. Somebody else.
I had a client, and he came in because he was having relationship issues with his girlfriend of 4.5 years, and he was feeling a lot of anxiety and stress because he knew he loved her, but he didn't want to be with her because of the way she was. So at the end of the 10 weeks, he came to, after discussion and talking and going back and forth, he actually said that I'm as much a part of the problem in this relationship, and it's not just her. Because the first 3 sessions, he kept saying, I want her to change. I want her to do this. I want her to do this. I said, well, she's not the one who's here. You are. So what are we going to do with this? How are we going to work this? And through making him aware of what he was doing, he started to not react and kind of deal with situations more calmly. At the end of the session, during the sessions, I think in about week 6, he moved out. And, well, the last session, the termination session, he says he was moving back in with his girlfriend and going to make it work.
See, it's kind of the same situation in reverse, kind of a reverse God complex in a way, okay? But there's some God stuff in there. Because he's not wanting to be in a relationship with a person. He's wanting to manufacture a mate that's independent of who the person is. And the problem is, in doing so, he actually may miss the wonderful things about her that he obviously saw to some extent when he first got together. But then a funny thing happened. He decided that he needed to mold her to be who she wanted rather than embrace and get to know her for who she was and appreciate that. Which isn't going to work even if it works. In the extreme, it can be the source of abusive relationships. The sense of entitlement that you should be who I want you to be, and therefore the justifiable rage when you're not who I think you should be. That's the source of abuse and violence, by the way. Not anger, okay? An entitlement to the ownership of defining the person in the relationship with you, and a sense of outrage when they don't follow your entitlement. That's the problem with abusive relationships. It's got nothing to do with anger. Not a thing. But you look at all the anger management. I have to go to court all the time to explain to judges why I don't do anger management in this case. Because it will actually fuel the problem. Because if you think about it, if the problem is that I'm in a relationship with you, and the problem is I get angry, what's the covert implication?
You're not fulfilling expectancy.
Meaning that the problem is that she does bad stuff and I get upset about it. Okay? So, I have to learn to deal with her inadequacies. Every abusive client will accept that as a treatment plan. The problem is that she's messed up and I just have to be able to handle it better. Because that's where he starts. As opposed to realizing, wait a minute, okay, the problem is with me. Why am I thinking that I'm entitled to have her be this way when it's not her? Let me get that out and take another look at her. And once he gets another look at her, because who he wants and thinks he's entitled to making her be goes away, he actually has a relationship with her, not the potential that she has to become what he wants. Okay? Because in the relationship, that's the risk. That if he's able to do that by force, by manipulation, by physical intimidation or emotional blackmail, then what will happen is you'll have another person who's divorced from themselves, who will be depressed and feeling poorly about who they are. When it's not poorly about who they are, it's separated from who they are. And somebody who thinks is entitled to having that, that's a relationship that is doomed not only to fail, but to get really problematic. Okay.
But that's why it's also so powerful to increase people's awareness of that interconnectedness.
Yes.
You know, that way, if I change something with myself, she's going to change.
Exactly right. Okay. And if you want your relationship to change, it presumes that you're going to have to make a shift. Okay. And that's the only part you have any control over, by the way. Okay. The minute you get into trying to make the other person be something else, and that's your goal, that relationship is doomed to fail, because either you'll kill the relationship or you'll kill the spirit of the person, and if it goes bad enough, you'll kill the person themselves. Okay, it's just, killing the spirit and killing the person is the same process. Invalidating who the person is and being dismissive and owning this as an entitlement that is supposed to meet your beck and call. Okay, that's the fundamental dynamics of abusive relationships. Doesn't have anything to do with anger, nothing. Okay, and that's where I think a lot of concepts of abusive and violent relationships fail, because you don't understand the needs again. The need for control coming from insecurity on the side of the guy who's really frightened that who he is isn't going to be strong enough to have somebody voluntarily want to be in a relationship with him. Okay. Yes?
I guess it was a need right now with a kiddo who needs to feel validation.
From who?
Is figures of authority that should be trusted individuals.
So anybody bilingual here speak Spanish or any other language, by the way? Yeah? Okay. Can you interpret the word validate?
That valor, no, that valor, no.
Okay, now pick a word people can interpret. Can translate, I'm sorry.
Needs to feel heard.
Okay. Can you interpret that? Needs to feel heard? Listen to?
Que le escuchan, that they're listening to him.
Okay. Okay. Okay, this is one of those subtleties again about clarity of language and being exposed to the fact that everybody in this room, especially this guy here, is an elitist. Okay. Okay. Okay.
An elitist?
Yes, an elitist. Okay. 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 And you, worst of all, are an elitist. Okay. Okay.
I didn't hear the previous conversation, so I don't want to back off.
Yeah, so you don't know if it's a compliment or not. Okay?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
That's the bad news.
It has to do with who is our work for. It's for the client. Okay. And one of the reasons why words don't translate is because they're too nuanced and specific. Okay. And see, when you said validate, it rolled off very easily. But what does that mean to your clients? And they'll nod and put their name on the list, on the plan, but they won't know what you're talking about. Okay? And if they aren't clear about what you're talking about, it'll be hard for them to truly invest in it. Now, they'll try because they want to do the work, because they trust you, because you're the therapist. But trying will be very hard if you don't have a real connection that's meaningful. Okay? So again, just be cautious about your language. And the easiest way to check on that is just to ask, how can you translate that into whatever language it is? And if it's not translatable, the language is probably specialized and specific to your training. Okay? And so to think about that, because the service plan needs to be something that your clients can embrace. And we don't need to take a service plan and have to translate it into the same language, okay, in such a way that our clients can understand what the plan is. It's a very subtle thing, but it's why it's important to appreciate your educational level, because it does make you elite, not elitist. That's an approach you can take to it. But you are in the academic and educational elite. And you can do the humble thing and think that you're just this, and that's fine, but I'm not hearing that, okay? Because it affects your language and your ability to communicate clearly with people who are everyday people. That whole thing about, remember the debate we used to have about the normal curve, which, I had to wake up to, and realizing that the norm, the average, is something that we're off of, and therefore can be biased in a way that we're blind to what the average person is thinking or might be able to do in a given situation. And which is why in a lot of our conversations, most of which we probably can't have publicly, realizing what it means that the average person in the country is average in intellect and everything else.
Does everybody understand that? What is average?
Normal curve, what's average?
Don't everybody speak at once.
I know. See, that's what I'm talking about. Daniela, what's the normal curve average mean?
It's what falls in between the bell curve that is not the.
What's the numbers?
Okay.
On a Webster scale.
Yeah. Well, even if it's, because they're not all psychologists, okay?
Oh, okay.
But if you're in the middle, on that middle line, what does that mean in terms of who's and how many people on one side versus the other side?
50.
It means 50% of the population is on this side, whether it's height, intelligence, there's a normal curve, normal distribution, and 50% on this side, okay? So where do you all think you fall?
Oh, we're in the end.
Okay? You're probably going to be close to a standard deviation on this side, okay? Which means it explains why we have certain decisions about politicians, okay? And why certain people can get elected, and why certain policies can be passed. And you're thinking, oh my God, can you believe that? Yeah, because, and this is where you were teaching me, it's easy to believe because the average person is average. That's not a complaint, it's a reality. Okay.
But what does average mean, though? What is an average person? What does that mean?
Well, like most others.
Like most others? Well, yeah, but what does that mean in terms of their ability to process, synthesize, reproduce, think, calculate, strategize? What does that mean for that person? Are they good at it?
They're average.
They're average.
Yeah.
Okay.
It means that in a room of 100 people, there will be likely 49 or 50 people that they can do better, whatever it is, and 49 or 50 people that will do worse. Like with height, there'll be 49 or 50 people shorter than you, 49 or 50 people taller than you, okay? And so you have to keep that in mind with your language. And that's not being patronizing. It's accepting the fact that you've invested 2 decades of education to learn something, and you probably have. And to respect that in terms of being able to communicate with your clients in a way that what we're doing is accessible, that they understand it, and don't have to translate it, because they may or may not ask you if they don't know. They'll nod their heads and won't know, okay? It's one reason why when you nod your heads and don't know, I say, well, yeah, but answer. Okay? I want to hear what you're saying, so I have a sense of whether you're just nodding because I'm at this end of the table and I'm the director, or whether you're nodding because you agree and really understand, or nodding because you're falling asleep, or whatever, okay? Okay? All those things are possibilities in probability theory. So
Well, one of the things that happens also is that is your expectations on that individual, which oftentimes is motivated by and actually influenced by your own perception of self.
Mhm.
And so when you think of yourself, it's like, I had a really interesting experience one time. I did a murder case in which, and I was a young psychologist, and it was like one of my first murder cases I had done, and, you know, I'm all hyped up and everything to see this crazy guy. And so I'm in the jail cell with him, and what he had done was take a 44 Magnum pistol and blew his partner's brains out with a pistol. Took his ID, went across the country posing as him.
Mhm.
Okay? And I said to him, you know, which was really bizarre, and I'm thinking, damn, you know, I mean, what does it take to do that? What, you know, your partner's sleeping on the couch, you walk over, put a gun to his head, and blow his brains against the wall. Hmm?
this is a good question.
Yeah, well, yeah. You know, so I'm kind of naive. I'm going, how'd that feel? You know? And he looked at me really quizzically, and he was kind of like, I don't know, you know, like shooting a hole in the wall. Yeah.
Hmm?
It was at that point I realized that everybody didn't have the same morals and ethics I do. Okay? People who have less intelligence than you, many times we will subscribe to them the same intelligence that we have. Okay? So our expectations of them sometimes is where we become disappointed in their performance because they're not performing at a level that we expect, even though they can't. And it's your illusion or delusion that is causing you difficulty in understanding where they're coming from and understanding why they're making the decisions they're making, which sometimes you think, man, that's really stupid. You know, well, it's because they are stupid.
If they're on one standard deviation below the core. Otherwise, they simply lack the vision and clarity that you have by both innate intelligence and professional training. Okay? So the bottom line is it gets back to the source of frustration. It's yours. Maybe the frustration you have is because your plan is detached from the client's need or beyond, remember, stages of change and readiness, beyond what they're ready for in this moment. We want the outcome, but we haven't built the progressive building blocks to get to where they are. And then if that's the case, the only conclusion you can come to as a therapist is that either the client's incapable or they're unmotivated and resistant. It might be that the plan is not effective as it's currently written in its relevance or what the client's capable of at this moment. Maybe they can do it, but maybe not right now. Maybe there are other things that need to be accomplished first. Maybe they just can't do it. Like the parent who comes in with the autistic kid, severely autistic kid, and her real goal, which she says, is for my kid to have a normal life. Okay, well, normal by what standard? Okay, because if she's looking at normal in terms of bell curve normal, this kid is going to be doomed to a life of frustration and feelings of disappointment. Now, if she can adjust her standards to the bell curve of autistic and developmentally disabled kids, and then push that to always push past what may be the norm or the average, then we're not resigning the kid to a life where there isn't encouragement and challenges. We're still pushing, but we're pushing at a level where the kids, where success is possible. But we have to, whether therapists or parents or whatever, relationships, we have to sometimes be cognizant of what we're trying to impose on the situation as opposed to working with the situation.
Let me add something else to it. It's kind of interesting. You talk about the bell-shaped curve and everything. There's always a regression toward the mean. So two parents who have a below average IQ, probability-wise, will most likely have a child who's a slightly more intelligent than they are. Okay? Two parents who are really high intelligence, 135, 140, will typically have a kid who's less intelligent than they are. Not that, you know, it's not, that doesn't mean they can't create a genius, or that doesn't mean that the person, you know, and there's always exceptions to the rule, but basically there's a regression back toward the mean always. Okay? So oftentimes you'll run into parents as you're doing therapy who claim to you that their kids are geniuses.
Well,
my kid is real smart.
By comparison.
Yeah, by comparison. You know, and the kid is average intelligence, but the parents are like dull normal. So they sure seem smart. You know, I mean, I often have run into that where parents say, yeah, I want my kid tested because I think he's a genius. What did he do to make you think he was a genius? Well, you know, geez, he's getting, you know, he's a wizard with math. Really? Okay. And to them, he is a wizard.
By comparison.
By comparison.
Bell curve.
And so what happens oftentimes is that, and often you'll run into also, that some parents get really mad at their kids who are smarter than them because they can outmaneuver them. You know? And that's when you start getting into some abuse issues and other kinds of things.
And the other side, too, that you see is how many of you have cases, if you think about this, where the kid is fundamentally more sound, emotionally stable and intelligent than both of their parents, and how frightened that kid gets. Like one kid says, you know, if I'm the smartest, healthiest one in my house, I know I'm screwed. Okay? But if you can see, he can see the evidence around him, by the way, that he is both smarter and more emotionally stable than both his mom and his dad. And to think about how frightening that is as a kid, and where does that fall in terms of need? What's going to happen is a lot of people are going to look at this kid as a behavioral problem. He's acting out, he's oppositional defiant, all this kind of stuff. When the real need is he doesn't feel safe and doesn't feel emotionally secure because the adults around him can't provide that sense of stability, structure, and confidence that he really needs. So he's acting out because not he has an authority issue. You have that too. That's a whole different thing, okay? But you also have kids who have a credibility and authority issue. I'm supposed to put my life in the hands of these folks? My mom was prostituting and cracked out on drugs. My dad's in jail and I don't know where he is half the time. And now they're mad at me because they want to be my parents now? Okay? And it might be true, but there's no credibility in that relationship. And the kid's thinking, if I turn my life over to them, I've already seen where that went. What's my evidence it's not going to be different? So whether the parents are committed or not, it still creates a dilemma for the kid about putting himself in the hands of people that couldn't keep him safe and where he can't predictably feel safe and secure. So yeah, he's going to be opposed. And if that's his experience with authority, what's he going to think about everything from a teacher, a probation officer, a coach, I guess a professor at school, a boss? There's a failure of appreciation of the credible, of the notion of credible and responsible authority.
There's also an issue with it's kind of interesting. It's funny when you run into it when parents, where the kid is smarter than the parents, and the parents really don't like it.
Yep.
Okay, and so they will do everything in the world to sabotage many times the kid, and they will say that he does X, Y, and Z when he really doesn't really do those things. The interesting part about that is that the kid is aware that the parents do not have their act together. Right? So what he does many times is compensate for them, okay, and many times will do things that will sort of undermine what the parents, and then he then extrapolates that to outside forces, and so he thinks now all adults are just like his parents, so I can manipulate them, and I can get away with it, and then he runs into people who are just as smart as him, and oh shit, you know, and but that typically that happens frequently also, you know.
So it gets back to being clear about what the need is and addressing it accurately. Okay. So somebody else want to take a shot at what do you believe in your client needs, and let's take a look at it.
Well, I have something. I was here thinking about a case that I had where the kid indeed is not safe in terms of the housing. They're undocumented from Mexico. The stepdad got arrested and was the source of income. The mother...
Trees and forests.
Us?
Trees and forests. Trees and forests. Don't get lost.
Oh, sorry. Okay. So here I'm thinking, the kid the family's about to go homeless, and really there's no safety, there's no food.
Okay, so what's the basic need?
It's definitely safety.
Okay, now, what are other people saying about this kid and what the kid needs?
Well, that he needs to communicate with the mother.
According to
the mother.
Okay, that's the mother saying he needs to talk more.
Right.
Okay.
And the two siblings are fighting.
Okay.
But I can see the point of view of the child thinking the mother has so much on her plate, she doesn't want to worry her anymore.
It becomes a burden.
Yeah.
So what if he's not talking because he doesn't want mom to worry anymore?
And he could say that on the first session.
So let's say that's the case.
Right.
And the plan is he needs to communicate with more with his mother. Not going to happen.
She can't handle it.
Okay? Whether she can or not, that's not his plan. He sees that potentially as burdening his mother, which means the need has to get to why he's not talking. It can't just be talk. And sometimes it's logical, but it doesn't. And can you also make sure you sign this and also the CFT principles? Often the needs are logical, but it's not at the beginning of the chain. Okay. So yeah, the kid needs to go to school, but why is he not going to school? Yeah, the kid needs to talk more with his parents, but why is he not talking? Okay. So the need has to do with really understanding how there's a motivational factor that drives the problem behavior. Okay, and the problem behavior are going to be the objectives, but don't confuse the objective with the need. Like the kid, well, one of the objectives is for the kid to be able to go to school, but the need is not going to school. The need is the kid is terrified to come out of his room because of all the stuff that went on in his house. So you have to be very clear about getting to the need, which is the source. The problem behaviors, those are your measurables as far as objectives and incremental progress. And then your action steps, end up being what you choose. Always, again, part of the training or service planning, the action step always has to include the intervention that you're doing in frequency. Okay? One action step, preferably the first one in my mind, just so that it becomes routine, is action step number 1. Individual therapy once a week, family therapy once a month, whatever it is. Okay? Just make it a routine, because by audit, that needs to be there. Then beyond that, you have other specific action steps that have to do with your therapeutic strategies. But you can see how it starts with diagnosis. If it's disconnected from the diagnosis, that's a problem. Explosive mood disorder, okay. Episodic mood disorder, you get that a lot, or ADHD. Whatever the diagnosis is, the first need should be related to that in some way. There should be some continuity. It can't be ADHD, primary diagnosis, and the next step is, attending school is the need. Now, you might say, also by the way, whenever there's a diagnosis where the person is seeing one of our prescribers, one of the action steps is always keeps appointments and complies with the medical advice of the prescriber. Whenever the person is seeing a prescriber, that always has to be also an action step, okay? Maintain regular appointments, meetings, and compliant with prescriber medications or recommendations, okay? So that way, there's continuity again. Now, there may be secondary issues, like you were pointing out, that come up as goals too, or needs. But there should be a direct connection between the diagnosis and the first need. And then you may have secondary needs too. But you don't want to flood the picture. If you're doing more than 2 or 3 needs, it's probably confusing the issue. And it also is a situation where you're not seeing the process and you're nitpicking details. And that you can probably collapse needs into one general need with different objectives. Confidence in self and abilities can apply to school, can apply to sports and social activities, whatever. But what happens is if you have more than 2 or 3 needs, particularly 3, the more you go above 3 goals, it's very likely that nothing's going to happen. It's one of those everything and nothing things. Everything's on there so nothing gets done. And so there's no focus. So you got to pare down your work so that it's digestible by language, okay? And if the need can't be understood by a 12-year-old, I don't care if the client is 52. If the need statement can't be understood by a 12-year-old, rewrite it. Because it's entirely possible that we're dealing with that bell curve thing. Validate internal states and modulate emotions. I saw that one. It's like, what does that mean? Okay. I'm a PhD and I'm not sure I know what that means. Okay? But we get into that language that makes sense to us, that we've acclimated to because you are academically in the elite. Okay? And, if I'm at that 50% mark, the average person, average intelligence, it's not that I'm stupid, okay? Average person, I can't get there. And also think about the psychological impact of not being able to understand my own need statement.
Yeah.
How stupid do I feel now? I already feel like I'm screwed up. Now I can't even understand what she's talking about. Okay? I must be even worse. Yeah?
At best, I think that they see themselves as being inadequate.
Yeah.
I think it validates their inadequacy. But it's interesting. How many people have kids? Do you know that most people know more about their automobiles than they know about their kids? I guarantee you, right now, in this room right now, and be honest, what is your kid's IQ?
How much?
I guarantee you'll say as a parent, he's smart or she's got her shit together.
Now, on the other side, how many do you know about how much gas you have in your car right now? Look at that. You don't know what's in your kid.
Comparable.
You don't know what's in your kid, but you know what's in your car.
If I am, here's another interesting concept. If
I
I'm,
know what's in my kid, but I can't maybe say his IQ number. I don't think that's relevant to knowing what is it. What
I'm
is
just saying. I'm just saying that you know more
I might
about.
have not
I'm saying a
given
lot
him
of
an
people
IQ.
know more about their cars,
I
or
have
more,
ideas.
or more about their house, or more about a lot of other objects than they know about their
I think
kids.
you're
That's all
right.
I'm saying.
I'm just teasing you, but I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and the interesting part about and here's the kids. Now, would you say the kids are the most valuable possession you have?
Yes, they are.
By far, right?
I don't know.
Well, you know,
Well, you'll
You really
soon
like
find
that.
out. Okay, but
Let's see.
would you agree with that your kids are your most valuable asset?
of course.
If you had had the choice between giving up your car, giving up your house, and giving up your kids, you give up your house, right?
Which house?
No doubt.
The condo or the?
See, don't start.
Okay.
All right.
Either
But
one.
now think
Okay.
about this. Think about this. If I'm 14 years old, would you give me your car and let me use it?
No.
Why not?
She doesn't know how to drive yet.
Yeah, but you give me your kid.
No.
You let me babysit your kid.
No.
Maybe you wouldn't, but a lot of people do. A lot of people look to scar the neighborhood. You know, hey, can you babysit for me? Don't even know the kid.
Oh.
I know a little girl lives in our neighborhood that's where she makes a lot of extra money babysitting, and she'll go and solicit, say, you know, hey, you ever want to go out and whatever, you know, I'm a good babysitter and this type of thing, and you know, people say, oh, great, yeah, oh, we've been, oh, yeah, absolutely, you know, so take the kid. You know, and here's this 14, 13-year-old kid who has no clue about anything, CPR, anything else. If anything happens, you're screwed.
They aren't going to know. They're going to be on TV or iPod or
And
something
really,
anyway.
and, you know,
So-
and hopefully the kids are asleep. Yeah.
Most likely, parents who do that, the kids are going to be better off with a 14-year-old anyways.
Yeah.
At least not
There's
worse
some
off.
possibility.
But I'm
Yeah.
saying that that's more common. That's not really with below average parents or anything. I'm saying most parents do this.
Right.
Well, there
Most
was
parents will give their kid up to a 16-year-old in a heartbeat.
My daughter babysitted 2 little girls this weekend. She's 14 years old.
Exactly.
Oh my God.
Exactly. That happens a lot. And so but you wouldn't give your car to a 14-year-old, but you give your kids to a 14-year-old. Think about it.
Well, the other thing to think about in terms of quality that will help you understand the value of the hour that you have, theoretically a therapeutic hour. There was a study done by a gentleman by the name of Stephen Glenn, who was a psychologist who also, I think, adopted like 13 kids or something. And I think the study was done in late 90s. So hopefully it's changed, but I'm not sure it has. And I may have mentioned it before, but what they did was that they polled random sample. They polled kids and parents and asked them, how much time do you spend in conversation with your kid each week? Okay. And that didn't include, did you do your homework and clean your room and all that kind of stuff, okay? And then they did some observational work too to kind of look at validity, okay? What would you guess would be the average amount of time that parents spend with their kids in actual conversation on a weekly basis? You'd say weekly basis. Less than an hour? Anybody think more than an hour, less than an hour?
Less than an hour, probably.
How much did you go less?
15 minutes.
15 minutes? You go 15. Anybody lower than 15 minutes? So we have a range, basically 15 minutes to an hour.
That
Okay.
doesn't include, like, did you do your chores?
No, it doesn't count.
So that
Like
would
solid
be like
conversation.
2
That's
days.
conversation.
Yeah.
Okay. Not did you clean your room and take out the trash? No, just conversation. Okay. They estimated on the average, and this is the average family, the average family 22 to 25 minutes a week of actual conversation. And you have the kid or the family's undivided attention for an hour. Okay. When I do training with residential programs, what I do is I have them calculate, assuming a length of stay of 6 months, therapy sessions twice a week, which is the norm in the one area. And I have them calculate the amount of time they spend in conversation with kids versus the same with their own parents. And what I was having them understand is by the time the kid leaves this program, you have had more conversation with that kid in the 6 months than the kid had with their own parents for their entire life.
You know, the other interesting part, with one of the things that I always emphasize a lot, is that, and this is for the males in the room, fathers, you know, are probably less communicative with their siblings than mothers are. We tend to drop that off on the mother and talk to your mom, you know, whatever. You know, if it ain't important, don't talk to me. You know, that type of thing. It is imperative that fathers engage in conversation, activities with their offspring, male or female. It's imperative. One of the ways in which girls learn about what it is, what a man is all about, is by their relationship with their father. Boys learn what it is, and girls, I hate to say this to you, and don't take this as being offensive, but you can teach a kid a lot of things, but you can't teach him how to be a man. Okay? And it's important that males have that kind of relationship with their male children, and that I mean the value of that is beyond belief. Why we don't do that, or we're very proud of them when they're running touchdowns or scoring baskets and whatever. We're out there rooting for them and what have you, but that's not conversation. You know, do you spend time taking them places, doing things with them, sitting down, talking about sex, talking about their relationship with other males in the environment, talking to them about aggression, talking to them about all kinds of different things, you know, and about their feelings, basically. I'm talking about other male children, and it's very important that males, as a father, engage in that. It's very important that males, as a father, engage with their female offspring, and that teaching them what, and then modeling for them what a man is, who a man is, what he's really all about, and your relationship with your wife and your relationship with your significant other is also part of that, because they see that crap. So when you're dissing mom, you think that they don't see that? Oh, that's how you do. That's how you control them women, huh? Shit, okay. You know, and they see that, or they see the reversal when mom is undercutting dad, and kids will play it two against the middle. I'll tell you a story about my sons and two turkeys. I come home.
Just keep in mind, one of them is the president of the company.
Yeah, I know. But he was a ring leader in this shit.
Yeah, I know. We've told these stories for years.
I mean, I come home, I'm from work and I'm tired. I sit on the couch, you know, here Justin and Jared, they're running around the house in the backyard playing basketball and stuff. They come in, and their mother's already told them no ice cream before dinner. None. No ice cream for dinner. I'm sitting down looking at something on TV. They come, Dad, can we have an ice cream? Can we have an ice cream sandwich? Yeah, I'm getting shit. Yeah, sure. Okay, cool. Whatever. You know, get out of here. You know, typical dad response, right? So they get their ice cream sandwich. They go out in the backyard, man. They're chomping down. In comes mom. I told you not to have any ice cream. Dad said it was okay. You know, the old setup, right? And so you guys are going to pay dearly for this.
They're still
so
paying.
I learned how to ask questions of my kids. Can I have an ice cream? Would you want to tell you? I learned real quick. Okay. But kids will set up parents. Now, if she now becomes angry with me, and we get into a big old fight behind it, whatever, what are we modeling for the kids? Okay. How do we resolve conflict? How do we conflict resolution and what have you? How do we deal with this effectively? You know, do we now laugh about it and say, okay, you know, you guys got us, okay, cool. We won't bite on that again, okay? Or do we get into a big fight? Well, you know, you should have known better. You know. You with me?
Either way, the kids have the ice cream.
Either way, the kids still got the ice cream. Now, the ice cream's gone.
I know it's gone by that point.
It's gone, but they're horsing it down because they know.
Well, because they know.
No, yeah, they know.
Exactly.
You know, so.
You know, another thing too about it had to do with the subtle bias thing. One of the referrals I got, and I read when when clients and parents ask for preferences, but I don't always follow them. Okay. The interesting thing is this came from a 16-year-old kid that's also in Lighthouse, who's doing really well. Okay, but he hit a stuck point, and that had to do with your point about emotions in men. Okay, he requested a change to a female therapist so he could talk about his emotions. What he's really doing is avoiding talking to his male therapist about emotions, and either because he believed that, either because he wasn't comfortable with it as a guy, that he would cry, or that he felt guys are not capable. Either way, it's a problem to accept that notion that you can't learn about emotions and feelings from a man, or that he was unwilling to go there with a guy. So I turned it down. And yeah, and I said, no, I'm not doing that. Well, why? Well, because here's what I'm thinking. And I told him that you obviously have a lot of emotions, and I think you're really afraid to express them with other men. And I think for you to be honest in embracing that, you need to talk to your therapist and deal with the fact that there's a part of you that says men aren't supposed to do this, to sit and really talk about emotion, or that men aren't capable of it. And it's probably true his dad wasn't, but his therapist clearly was. And what was happening is the kid was actually getting more emotional and was uncomfortable with being emotional in front of another male. Okay, and that's what you got to embrace, and to be able to balance out men and women. And I'm probably going to do a presentation that has to do with those kinds of gender things, because what I see, again, remember, in the beginning is the end. Okay, and I see this in the groups that I'm doing, that you start seeing gender bias happening day one. And when I mean day one, it's true, because you can go to hospitals and delivery rooms, and if you listen, you can tell what gender the baby is, because if it's a girl, they're going to say, isn't she pretty? If it's a boy, isn't he big and strong? And you can extrapolate problems in terms of how many problems do girls and women struggle with. It has to do with the emphasis on beauty and physical appearance. And how many problems do boys struggle with because the emphasis is on physical strength and imposing your will. And it starts with, right there, subtle ways of putting boys and girls into boxes rather than creating a balance with men who are strong and capable, but also emotionally and compassionate, and women who are certainly emotional and compassionate, but also can be independent, strong, and courageous. And so we have to really understand that we're balancing people away from imbalances based on a variety of things, biases of whether it's gender or race or whatever. That people learn those things and to believe in them.
Yeah, that's why I'm saying it's important for
critical
units to have a mother and father. When I said that the women can't teach a boy how to be a man, nor can a man teach a girl how to be a female, be a woman. Okay, I mean that's
it's a struggle.
It's a struggle for. I mean, I have no clue what it's like to be a female. So that comes from the mother side. I have a role that I play from the father side, but the balance between the two.
The balance is critical.
You know, and that doesn't mean that the female shouldn't talk to the male child, or that the male father shouldn't talk to the female child. That doesn't mean that at all. What it means is that we find balance, and that gives the kid a much stronger foundation, so that they can, as a male, show emotion, have compassion, have empathy, have sympathy, have feelings. At the same time, the female having the power, the courageousness, and understanding that they are equal, that they have the ability to succeed, they have the ability to overcome obstacles. You know, that strength is not necessarily brute strength. Strength comes from inside. And that is something that is brought forth from modeling, and also from them observing what you do. Your passion for your profession will play a significant role in how your kids have a passion for what they do.
Exactly.
And if you have no passion for what you do, and you jump from one thing to another, never really focusing on anything, that's probably what your kid's going to do.
See, that applies to career and to relationships. We were just talking about how if a kid moves from guardian to guardian, foster care to foster care, we can't expect the kid's going to commit to any one person. The same thing is true of a career.
Exactly.
If it's unfocused and fragmented, how can you expect a kid to understand the idea of commitment to anything? A relationship, a career, a business, a belief system, it doesn't matter, a religion. They won't commit to anything because for them there's no sense of permanence, no sense of stability. It's just reacting to the situation around them. They become chameleons. You know, let me see what the situation is and I'll decide who I'm going to be. Okay?
Not to mention the fact they are always watching.
Everything.
And if you got something in your house you don't want your kids to see,
assume
get it out of your house.
Yeah, because everything that's in there and everything that's
They
going
know.
on, the kids will know.
Okay.
That's why my rule, and I talk about this in the staff meetings at South all the time. If there's a family and you need to know what's going on, really, hope and pray there's a kid between the age of 8 and 12 years old. They will know everything and won't know any better to not tell you. Okay, that will be the most honest witness of what's going on in the family, kids between the age of 8 and 12. Before that, they're oblivious to certain things. After that, they become aware of censorship. Between 8 and 12 years old, they'll say anything. You know, so it's why I've said in the past that when I'm interviewing families and there's a kid, I like to pull them out and talk to them separately. And we do team interviews, and I'll sign somebody else, the parents. I want to talk to the kid that's 9 and 10 years old, because that's when I'm going to get a clean, objective view of what's really going on.